Hey Kieran, how you doing today?
I'm good, Emily. How are you, man?
I'm doing well as well. It's great to see you again, and hope you're getting through these winter months here. And thanks so much for joining me today. I'm glad to
Yeah, I'm
have
loving it.
you.
Thank you. I've, I was introduced to 20 centimeters of snow when I first arrived here in Canada. Just
Oh,
so yeah, nothing.
welcome to North America. Yeah. After law school. I'd love to hear about where you are now and uh, your work with Gradvantage and how that all came to be. And tell us more of your story because it's really exciting.
Yeah, man, cool. So I moved out from Birmingham or up to the north, which where the weather is very similar to here in Vancouver. Snow, very cold, but the people are a lot warmer.
Yeah.
Um, it, and so I had a great time socially at university from day one. We have something called Freshers Week here. The first, it probably is Freshers Month, the first month of just relentless parties, like at
Tough
all
job.
times.
No, those relentless parties. I know. They can get
Yeah. But really, I feel like the law school should have banned us from them because they didn't mess around. Like from week one to week two, it was pretty heavy stuff, and I didn't really engage with it straight away, and so I struggled in that respect. But
Yeah.
you get back on top of it, you get law groups. But yeah, so I went to the University of Leeds, and I chose law and French because somehow I'd managed to realize I had this talent for French, since like grade seven, year seven, and I carried it on and went to university and wanted to continue to create that niche for myself, thinking, okay, law is competitive. Maybe having French might help. It was a Russell Group University, one of the top universities in the UK and in the world, especially for law. And I was introduced, I didn't realize the international component I'd be introduced to, sitting down and, 30% of my class being from Kuala Lumpur, Kenya,
So
Canada,
cool.
South
Yeah.
Africa, Australia. It was pretty amazing stuff. But it was a world to me that felt alien because, in all honesty, the majority of attendees at my university were all for majority from independent schools, white upper class. And I couldn't really see myself when, in terms of the social circles and really fitting in and making the best of it with candidates on my course because there were literally 3 Black males and about 5 Black females on the course at that time in a sea of like 150, 200 students. So my experiences were initially, it was fun, clubbing and whatnot, going out, socializing with the locals, but then on a morning coming into that lecture theatre, the level of engagement, I was fighting against so many things before I actually was able to engage with the content.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and that continued. That didn't really get better throughout the 4 years of my course. What did get better during law school was the circles that I created. So I became the president of the African Caribbean Society at that school, and I intentionally did that because I wanted to create a space for those juniors coming up after me to make sure that they could feel a sense of belonging community straight away. The little things about asking where to get your hair done, where do I get these foods from, um,
Yeah.
just being able to unplug from their class groups where they were, extreme minorities and coming into a space where they could decompress, they could be themselves.
Yeah, that sense of familiarity
Yeah.
is really important, and particularly I found, when you're a little, you're different than the people around you, it's nice to have that space to feel that sense of community, to feel that sense of home and belonging.
Yeah.
And that's incredible that you not only recognize that, but wanted to pass that along to the others, understanding the importance of that.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. And give me a lot of confidence. And, unknowingly, it also made me what was a bit of a B knock, like a big name on campus. And that helped, honesty, because people wanted to know who I was, or people already knew who I was before when I was just walking around,
Hmm.
in a space where usually I felt, ignored, or that people felt a bit intimidated by the way I looked, or it happened a lot. but because of that confidence, being a BNARC, I was able to socialize and really create collaborations with other societies, like JSOC, like the Jewish Society, even other societies that focused on like East African students or the Nigerian students, because there were still divisions there, just being a Black student.
Right.
Had conflicts.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I am gonna digress a little bit, because I jokingly was talking about this relentless partying and the socializing, and on a more serious note about that, I just want to highlight something, particularly as it talks about the stature that you had on campus and the networking, and even though the parties, they are exhausting, I think attorneys or business people in general sometimes don't prepare themselves for the importance of knowing how to socialize and making those connections. And sometimes I find law students go into law school and they absolutely have to hit the books. And particularly as they go into law firm life, a lot of it is politics and making sure you're in those right spaces at the right time. So I did joke about the parties, but the reality is there is a definite plus to making sure that you put yourself out there and do that. I just wanted to sort of not laugh about it, but kind of jokingly also talk about the importance of that and just keeping that in check.
Oh, of course. There were a lot of jammy students who could party 24/7 and still turn up, half drunk and ace tests. Like, there were a lot of smart candidates like that. I wasn't one of them, right? But yeah, I think putting yourself out there, getting myself elected to student president, collaborating across campus. What it did is it almost compensated for the lack of engagement I had with my degree. And it gave me an audacity. It gave me an audacity to go into spaces that I didn't naturally feel comfortable in. And that audacity I was able to continue post-graduation, in terms of getting roles, in roles that initially I had imposter syndrome in, thinking, why am I here? How am I doing this? But I had the audacity to be able to build relationships, to show that enthusiasm, to show my intellectual curiosity in people, no matter the environment I was in. And I can continue on that trajectory. And that is a big part, to be honest, of my success and where I am now. And it's a lot of what I try to put back into students that I coach at Gradvantage. I got my law degree, I got work experience, but really it was the audacity to put myself in certain spaces, to make connections with certain people that looked like me and that didn't. That really served and provided for me to be able to be where I am right now.
Yeah, and talk about the work that you're doing now. I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, so initially I graduated, 2013 with a 2-2 degree, which is not really an amazing degree you want to celebrate as a law student. You need a 2-1, usually prerequisite, to get into all the big law firms, to get a training contract, get that graduate offer. It wasn't a big surprise because I hadn't engaged as much, but it was still disappointing. And for most graduates, even if you're a first-class grad, there's usually a low, 18 months to 2 months to 2 years, where you're still trying to wonder out, where are you going? What's right for you? Some students are lucky enough they have grad jobs before they even finish uni, but that's a minority. And I went through that period and I managed to make the best of it. I created my own graduate scheme. I went to France and taught English, making sure that I was increasing my French language skills, but also was able to just show I could teach, I could present, I could develop relationships in other languages. So I realized that would be fun, give me some thinking space, but also add value. And then I ended up via a friend's recommendation at Rare Recruitment, which is a graduate recruiter. They almost act as an extension of graduate recruitment arms, consulting and actually providing candidates from diverse backgrounds, Black, Asian, minority ethnic backgrounds, and female, to get them into tech, law, finance, investment banking, consulting roles, internships, and grad schemes. That allowed me to look behind the curtain of what graduate recruiters were looking at, how they were identifying and assessing candidates. It taught me by proxy of having to teach them and be a coach, taught me how to write applications. It taught me how to ace interviews. It taught me how to go into assessment centers and group activities and do well. So it was a very strategic move that I went there and stayed there. I went as an intern and somehow managed to stay there for 2 years. And there were a lot of lessons learned. And it was those lessons that I learned that I wanted to give back. So I started Gradvantage once I left Grad to help people that were in my position when they were at uni, to make sure they didn't allow the imposter syndrome or the postgraduate depression to really affect where they're going to be in their potential. But I still was trying to figure out what I was doing because I hadn't secured a training contract. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do law anymore. There was a voice in the back of my head that was saying, you know, maybe you're not good enough to do this anymore, or maybe you don't really want it. And sometimes I listen to it, and other times I'm like, no, I do want it. I've disappointed myself. I mean, I've gotten the grades I needed, but I do want it. I can do it. And I can still help others with the values that I've learned. So Gradvantage right now, it's all about coaching candidates on a one-to-one basis. And it's vitally important it's one-to-one because everyone's different. Everyone's got different experiences. Some candidates need commercial awareness training. Others need to just talk about their imposter syndrome and get over that because I realize they're exceptional first-class grads. Certain candidates need to practice live mock interviews or assessment centers. So depending on what they need and what their strengths and weaknesses are, is how we'll center the sessions. I commercialized it during the pandemic because everybody was coming onto LinkedIn, students, grandparents, everyone was coming online, right? And the coaching industry all of a sudden exploded. So this little project I started in 2017 and was allowing to go by. Actually, I realized I had the whole infrastructure already. I'd already built it. I'd had the website. Yeah. I'd had the back end already done in terms of payments and bookings. It was all there. So what can I do? I'm ahead of the market. What can I do? So I actually put out a viral ad. I didn't know it was going to be viral at the time. I just told my story on LinkedIn and offered 100 students free one-to-one calls. And that's essentially how the commercial aspect of Gradvantage started. Because
wow. So 100 calls you had with students?
Yeah, I actually doubled it, so I had way more than 100 in the end.
You know, something that's quite fascinating that I'm recognizing as we're moving along in this conversation, and it's really very empowering, is what you're talking in terms of the work that you do and the work where you've been and what you do now. It all stems from giving back, and it's you want to make, you've been there, you've experienced X, you've experienced Y, you've been in certain landscapes, and you want to make it better for others. And it's a lot of people, particularly in the pandemic, they're looking for what drives them and what their mission is. And you've so powerfully been able to learn from your experiences and pass what you've learned on. And that advice is so integral to so many people. And I just keep seeing this theme in terms of, you know, where you are in your career and what you're doing. And it's phenomenal. Yeah. And talking about your own personal journey and giving back to others, who and how did you find mentors in the work that you're doing? How did you go about getting those connections where you were able to get advice to pass on, you know, that you're doing now?
Yeah, a lot of different routes. Like there were family friends that I'd heard about. I asked. I'm someone that's very hot on warm intros. So there were family friends that I knew of, or if anybody mentioned anyone that was related to law, I would just like, I need their contact details. How can you set up a call? Can you set up an intro? Tell them about me. Let me introduce myself. I'd love to pick their brains. So I was always doing that. At the same time, people I worked with. So I was lucky enough to work with so many exceptional minds through various careers that I've had. And building relationships on a more personal level, sharing a bit more about my dreams, and even allowing people that I admire to share more with me, asking more deeply into their personal lives, allowed us to build a connection whereby by virtue of that, I inadvertently made them my mentors without them knowing. So that's something I always like to do, is if I'm working with exceptional people, is almost link with them, connect with them, engage, so that I can then keep them on, my roster of mentors, people that I can always go back to and ask for help, support. And that's essentially how I did it, because LinkedIn wasn't as big. It wasn't as easy to reach out, during my post-grad time. It was really about third degree connections in real life.
What can our audience do to be a part of making changes in the space?
Depending on look at where you believe you can make change. I spoke about legal tech at that point. For me, I'm very passionate about diversity in the law, especially from a Black perspective, being a Black male, and for Black women coming into the legal profession. For me, I can't possibly care about anything else more than that, because of the experiences I had. For me, I did not want to be a martyr, being one of the first Black trainees in the firm. I appreciated I'd be able to open the floodgates and lead the way behind me. But selfishly, I also had my own hopes and dreams. And I had to weigh up my lifestyle, what I wanted for myself. I decided law wasn't for me in that respect. I could give a lot more value doing things like Gradvantage, being a legal recruiter behind the scenes, where you're a recruiter, that there are conversations we can have where we can influence somebody's life.
Absolutely. Yes. And I've watched that play out. And sometimes those, I'll call them like mini moments, where you might have been able to do something, whether it's just have that additional interview, have often been just as meaningful as, let's say, a placement. Those moments where your input matters, and then you push for someone that you think would do great at that role. And it's yes, as a recruiter, you see it, and I am thinking of a couple of those moments in specific, and already I notice like how I'm reacting. It's a very powerful feeling to know that you can do that in that space.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where we can make a difference, right? In our personality, we're coming to recruitment, make a difference in the legal profession, in the way that we engage candidates and connect them with law firms, right? And change people's lives. We change the trajectory and the influences in law firms. Just look at where your strengths lay, look at your relationships are, and see what you can do. I'm doing my very best now with the Gradvantage platform to create programs for diverse candidates as well, and partnering with other legal projects. A lot of law firms don't publish their numbers, or if they do, they're shockingly low, like 2%. And there aren't many actions that they measure in terms of what they actually do to make change. There are an increasing number that are starting to make commitments, but for me, I still think there needs to be much more of a financial investment.
Yeah, absolutely.
In really leveling the playing field and making sure that it's the profession really reflects society. Because
100%.
At the moment, especially in the UK, I'm not sure how it is on the US side. In the UK, the professions, they reflect society. And for the most part, we saw, during that very tense summer of George Floyd, that actually society is nowhere near where it needs to be, and it's still very damaging for a lot of the Black population across the world. And the spaces, being law firm being one of them, definitely contribute to that. So just listening and actually putting your money where your mouth is.
Yep.
What a lot of law firms need to do, and they need to continue to follow up and be accountable for what they're doing, not just for the next year or so because it looked good for PR.
Right, exactly. And I think there are ways to draw attention collaboratively, and I think you and I can talk about that more offline. And there are a lot of ways to. Now we're in that influential space, right, where we've learned and for me, I've spent a lot of these past 2 years sort of fine tuning and finding my voice.
Hmm.
And so podcasts like this and conversations like this that I keep having, what can we do together, audience included, to make this profession better for everyone?
Mm.
So
Yeah,
very,
it's the big question. It's a deep question we could talk about for so long.
yeah.
But it seems like it's going in the right direction. It
Hmm.
really does. Just how patient can we be for it to be at a place where the mental well-being of lawyers, no matter
Right.
race or creed or gender, it is good, that their family life is good. There were so many partners through the pandemic celebrating that they were having lunch and dinner with their families because they work from home, which was nice to see, but was also pretty sad as
Hmm.
well. That's something that they weren't able to do. Working so hard
Right.
to provide for a family they never saw, for wives that they were potentially on the lines of divorce with. Like it was bittersweet to see.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think it takes critical mass in all areas to be able to change not just the profession, but the attitudes of nations, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do often like to talk about childhood experiences or working with children on this podcast.
Hmm.
And I noticed that you are a sports ambassador and have experience with working with children. What have been some lessons or a lesson that you learned during one of these sessions?
Yeah, man. So yeah, I've always been involved in sports. I think I've worked with children of different ages, taught children from 4 up to 17, and also children with special educational needs as well.
Hmm.
And they were the most humbling experiences,
Yeah.
because I learned the value of patience,
Mhm.
and I also learned the values of not judging a book by its cover and understanding the capabilities that certain kids
Yeah.
had that were younger.
Yeah.
My younger students learned much quicker. My 4 to 6 year olds, I loved teaching them because they learned straight away, right?
Interesting.
Even if they didn't seem like they were listening. Someone was picking their nose, another kid was crying because someone else had hit them, but they were actually listening. They were just taking so much in from their environment.
Right. Yeah. Often we don't realize what they're absorbing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Um,
that's a keen observation. Keen
yeah.
observation.
So just being patient, understanding the capabilities, and not judging a book by its cover. It's really helped me a lot as a
Yeah.
manager when I've managed people. Um, I've I manage people in a style that is very organic to them because I understand that what works for me and what helps to curb my anxieties in terms of reporting to management and line management may not work for them and
Hmm.
may not work in the way they want to be managed. So people I've managed have always noted the difference in my style in allowing them to be more accountable as opposed to being micromanaged.
Hmm.
So, but they're the valuable lessons I've had that I've been able to take um, into leadership roles.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, this has been such a wonderful conversation. I could continue to go on, and I know you have